The Missing is the most important game Swery's ever made. I declare this to be true, but not specifically in terms of weaving a narrative laden with relevant social commentary. This game truly stands as a make-or-break moment in Swery's career, to leave a good first impression on the games industry, and to act as a reassurance for the backers of his company's sophomoric project, The Good Life, that their investment was worthwhile, being put to good use in this bizarre visionary's hands. Well, speaking as a backer of The Good Life, I'm relieved to admit that The Missing left me with a good familiar taste that I've come to expect from a Swery game. It's another unapologetic surrealist trip into the mind of a developer that proudly wears his influences on his sleeves, yet somehow still manages to put his own spin on old ideas, giving them a fresh coat of paint for the postmodern gamer. All of the missing pieces from his storied career have finally culminated to form an experience that expresses the lessons he's learned from his short-lived retirement, and spells great things for the future of his company. The Missing marks Swery's first game developed in his newly formed development studio, White Owls Incorporated, which is a team comprised of only 12 people. The company came to be in November of 2016, around a year after his departure from Access Games and his work on D4. This was a dark period in Swery's life, and he took a year-long sabbatical from the video games industry, where he traveled around the world, doing eccentric things, and occasionally popping up at a game convention where he met younger developers and rubbed elbows with industry legends. Thankfully, he didn't stay gone for long. It seemed as if the absence from the industry made his heart long for his former passion, and meeting with all these younger developers must have rekindled that fire within. During this time, he reflected on his past developments. What made them good? What would he like to change? This inspired him to develop a game that was so radically different from anything that he had created prior. So he put together a team, formed White Owls, and the rest is history. Or shall I say, the rest is a mystery, because The Missing was developed in secret for around a year before it was announced suddenly in February of 2018. The trailer leaves a lot to the imagination, with a sizzle reel of stock footage and Swery asking the audience a load of open-ended questions with no true hint of what the genre The Missing would belong to. All we learned from this announcement is that the game would be co-developed with Arc System Works, who are most famous for the Guilty Gear series. An unlikely collaboration indeed. Swery declares, frankly, this title will blow your mind. Yeah, I've heard that one before.
Beautiful Joe and Killer 7 are coming along smoothly. They are so original, they will blow your mind.
Then came nearly 7 whole months of silence regarding The Missing, which was seemingly overshadowed by the crowdfunding campaign of The Good Life. So anyone who was interested in The Missing had likely forgotten about the game's existence, or if it was still in development at all. Then out of nowhere, gameplay was finally shown off at Gamescom in late August of 2018, which was a little over a month before the game was set to launch. From this trailer, The Missing reminded me a lot of those old two-dimensional death platformers of the 90s like Prince of Persia and Another World, but with a heavier emphasis on the surreal aspects. And days after writing this sentence in my script, Swery confirmed those suspicions.
僕が子供の時はサイドスクロールのゲームってたくさんあったんですよ。で、日本で言うとアウターワールド、英語ではアナザーワールドかなとか、プリンスオブペルシャとか。
Now we're gonna take a slight detour for a moment to draw some parallels to one of the most major influences here, Another World. For those unfamiliar, Another World was a 2D sci-fi action platformer designed and developed by just one man, French developer Chahi. It's renowned for his work on developing his very own engine and designing all the art assets himself out of vector graphics, creating what has been regarded as one of the most highly influential games that embody the spirit of independent game development. Japanese developers like Suda51, Fumito Ueda, and Hideo Kojima have all declared their love for Another World. Another World begins with Lester, a scientist with a really sweet Ferrari, pulling up to his laboratory, where he's developing a particle accelerator. He's running some tests on the accelerator when a sudden bolt of lightning strikes the laboratory, causing the experiment to go haywire. The accelerator zaps Lester into a pool of water where tentacles are reaching up to pull him down. He quickly swims to the surface to find himself on another world. The controls here are very simple to learn. You can run, jump, or do these weak little kicks to smash some slugs. But before you get too comfortable in Lester's shoes, a shadowy beast drops down and gives chase to Lester. The game is segmented into a checkpoint-based level design, where you are trained to adapt to split-second actions or die, only to repeat them all over again. The brutally difficult platforming and quick-draw shootouts will either scare away weak-willed players or hone the skills of the persistent. It's one of those games where you either love it or hate it. Lester is captured by the inhabitants of the planet and is put into a cage with a nameless alien that Chahi refers kindly to as Buddy. Lester stages an impromptu breakout of the prison by swinging the cage and crushing a guard, thus solidifying his bond between him and Buddy. According to the rules, they're ride or die brothers now. That's just how it works. What's compelling about Another World story is the subtlety at play here. There's no dialogue or story text to read through. The events just unfold through the gameplay, making Lester's journey feel like an interesting twist on the trope of the alien arrival archetype found in most sci-fi games. This time around, the human protagonist is our little gray man in the story. Many future 2D side-scrollers would implement this isolated feeling of alienation and loneliness into the theme of their games. One example that comes to mind is 2010's Limbo. Another World's simple 2D format, vector graphics style, and quick runtime help preserve the experience for the modern gamer. Quite frankly, it still holds up, and the 20th Anniversary Edition can be easily acquired on almost all platforms, and it should be experienced by any gamer that wants to better understand one of the earliest examples of Western game design influencing the Japanese developers we love. Regardless, just keep Another World in the back of your noggin when you play The Missing or watch this review. You'll need to know this for the test. The Missing opens with the statement, "This game was made with the belief that nobody is wrong for being what they are," followed by a set of trigger warnings that seemingly try to take the player's feelings into consideration, but at the same time spoil a major plot point for them from the get-go. What was the purpose of this? These two cards might set the expectation that we're going to be presented with another typical independent conquest to overcome the challenges of sexuality or identity. Well, kinda, but I still ask that you curb your presumptions just a little bit because you're in for something really spectacular here. The White Owls are not what they seem. The story begins with our protagonist Jenna Jameson Macfield, Jackie Jameson Macfield, or JJ for short, JJ, and her friend Emily as they take a boat to Memoria Island for a camping trip. This time, instead of setting the game in the Pacific Northwest, we're off the coast of Maine in the Atlantic Northeast. See, it's totally different. JJ and Emily, illuminated by the glow of the campfire, laugh and commiserate until the player is beckoned by the game to press X to inflate the aggregate scores of the collective reviews of this game. This moment is gonna play really well on Game Journos Pro, that's for sure. Nice job, Swery. We fade to black and JJ is awakened to the beckoning call of Emily's ghastly voice.
Hey, JJ!
But she's nowhere to be found. Thus begins our journey of isolation and alienation to find Emily, and perhaps by the end, ourselves? The opening level of Memoria Island puts the player through the throes of a tutorial without any overbearing instructions. You learn to push boxes, climb over walls, and crawl through tiny gaps. Standard fare platforming stuff so far. Then a white owl drops a donut on JJ's head. My friends of non-denominational gender, we're officially in a Swery game. It's at this point that JJ finds herself at an abandoned power station where she gives chase to a lone moose that's in a field that's being ravaged by a thunderstorm. Flash! JJ is struck by a bolt of lightning, which sets forth the entire chain of events to follow. Bolt of lightning? Do you see the connection now? A group of woodland creatures and a doctor with a moose head tower over JJ's extra crispy corpse.
Shucks, in this respect, major hemorrhage.
And then she rises up from the ashes, only to generate a new set of skin. Cue the out-of-place upbeat theme song that doesn't match the tone of the scene. We're officially in a Swery game. JJ receives a text message from K, the motif stuffed animal that she was holding that got burnt to a crisp, whom doesn't provide any insight to what's actually going on and only seems to confuse matters more for the player. But that's okay, you know where we are. Undeterred, JJ presses forward and slides down a hay bale into some stacks of barbed wire, which dismembers her body into pieces. One could say that the missing takes typical 2D action platformer mechanics and turns them on their head. And now we can begin the comparisons to Never Dead. That's right, we have an immortal protagonist that can regrow their limbs on the fly. It's not an entirely original premise, but I'm not the first one to notice this, and it was also brought up to Swery by GamerHub TV during an interview where he doesn't exactly acknowledge the similarity to 2012's Never Dead.
The protagonist in the game is immortal, and she can use different parts of her body. She can hurt herself to solve different puzzles and overcome challenges in the game. So it's a little bit different than anything you've ever thought about, you've ever seen before, but we think it's pretty interesting.
That's a mechanic we haven't really seen a lot of. The last time I think we saw it might have been in Never Dead a long time ago. So that's really interesting to hear that you're changing the game like that.
Poor Shinta. One day you'll get your time in the sun. Whatever, it's not like anyone's using that IP or those ideas anyway. Let him have it. I feel the immortality mechanics found in The Missing were made more accessible to the average player by simplifying matters to fit on a two-dimensional plane. Where it lacks the fast-paced shooting and world destruction elements of Never Dead, it makes up with its own clever puzzle platforming and stylistic storytelling. The games are both unique enough and distinct in their own ways to draw any sort of solid accusation of plagiarism would just be unfair. It just feels like a new take on an old idea. Moving on. As you progress through the game, you'll come to know the extent of JJ's new powers. She can use her limbs as projectiles that can be thrown to knock down objects, or as a counterweight to help move across platforms. She can also shed all of her limbs to become a rolling head that will allow her to move through narrow gaps. But she's most vulnerable in this form, because if she hits a sharp object, she will die. Luckily, you can just hold Y to restore restore her form, but only if there's enough space. One of the most clever mechanics is when she breaks her neck. The world will flip upside down, which allows her to travel to normally inaccessible areas. Keep in mind that the world will flip back to normal if she fixes her neck. It's fun how they play with this mechanic. The final aspect of her immortality, which does seem a little bit borrowed from Never Dead, is the ability to set her body on fire, which is used to burn down objects in her pathway or to light up dark areas. However, she takes serious fall damage in this form, so platforming should be avoided or handled delicately. To contrast all the brutality on display, White Owls clash JJ against beautiful locales that help ease the grim scenarios she's often placed in. What also helps are the funny text messages JJ receives from her friends and family members that help deliver a more lighthearted nature to the story, but at the same time tend to sneak in elements of JJ's personal anxieties she experiences throughout her daily life. Swery also helps break the tension and lead the player along by laying out a trail of donuts to guide them along the way. There are nearly 300 donuts to collect. But donut, let that trick you into assuming the length of the game, as it's roughly 4 hours long. One of the side objectives are finding these sleepy time donut mascots that are hidden off the beaten path. When found, they'll give you a handful of donuts, as well as unlocking either alternate costumes, concept art, or additional text messages to flesh out the story. They're really fun to find, and I just miss when games used to give you alternate costumes without any additional money behind it. Swery's just been one of those guys to put in these extra bits into his games, and I greatly appreciate the gesture. For a low-budget game developed in the Unity engine, it still manages to imbue a strong sense of personality, with compelling drips of story that culminate into a memorable conclusion. Which, if you're familiar with any of Swery's prior work, you'll know that he's a master of setting up expectations only to subvert them entirely in the final act. The Missing is no different in that regard. Now, before I get into spoilers, I just want to summarize my feelings. The Missing is another hodgepodge of Swery's influences, creating a bizarre brainchild that's so uniquely infused with a personal zest that he kindly refers to as Swerism, which is kind of like a personal creed to make games that contain unexplored themes to create something that is both memorable and appealing to a worldwide audience. Oh, and also has some connection to food. Can't leave out his obsession with good eats. Here, I think he hit his target, as The Missing is quite possibly the one game that has the most universal appeal and stands to catapult him out of the realm of cult into the mainstream with only one major glass ceiling of awareness of the product, preventing it from breaking through. Now, if you came looking for my recommendation of this game, you got it. And now we're gonna get into the spoiler section, so if you want to avoid those, jump to the time code, and I'll see you in the conclusion. Throughout the game, JJ is pursued by a horrific monster wielding a box cutter known as the Hair Shrieker.
Wait!
It chases after JJ, relentlessly screaming in agony as if it wants to pull JJ into the darkness and consume her. From the clues we're given from JJ's exchanges in her text messages with her mother, who's seemingly pressuring her to go to what seems to be a gay conversion therapist, or her lesbian relationship that she carries on in secret with Emily, the player could easily make the connection that JJ is being pursued by a manifestation of her own anxieties, and that she actively engages in self-harm, but not only at the expense of good platforming. In many ways, it felt all too familiar, as if Swery was trying to make a game that imitated common themes found within a standard fare Western-developed independent game. Guaranteed high reviews in one easy step: just add lesbians. The ending segment of the game shattered my expectations entirely. It was so good. In the final chapter, JJ discovers that Emily committed suicide on top of a clock tower. In an act of pure despair, JJ follows in suit. Then a 100-year time jump takes place. JJ is still cursed by her immortality, and we find out she's been suffering this entire time. We snap to a school gym, where JJ lurches through the specters of her tormented past. The scene is long and very drawn out. It's a panoramic walk of shame that we have to experience with JJ, where we begin to understand the catalyst and impact of her own suicide. The anxiety she feels finally consume her as she morphs into the Hair Shrieker. In this moment, the player has control over the beast, and they can do nothing but actively try and snuff out the last remaining bit of love that JJ has left. We find that JJ had been living out a nightmare that was triggered by her suicide attempt, and the only way she can escape the madness is to finally accept herself and overcome the Hair Shrieker within.
I won't lose again. I'm ready to accept myself now. My mind is so clear as a crisp spring morning.
The big reveal hits. JJ was just a person struggling with their gender identity that attempted suicide. And then all of the surrealist pieces come into place in this moment. Just when I thought I had everything figured out about the game, my expectations were entirely subverted. We're officially in a Swery game. But I'm not just gonna leave it at that. I feel that there might be more to this narrative than what's being shown to us on a surface level. I think many people will just walk away from this game taking everything at face value, just assuming it's a plot about a person dealing with being uncomfortable in their own skin, but I believe there's a lot of Swery's own anxieties projected onto the character of JJ. And let me explain. I've been following Swery's career for many years, watching his struggles with alcoholism, hypoglycemia, and the fallout that came after his retirement from Access Games, when he left behind D4, which many consider to be his most ambitious work to date, that ends on one of the most intense cliffhangers of all time. Regardless, this moment in his career was a major turning point and a difficult choice to abandon something that he loved so dearly. After he left the company, he was attacked daily on social media, villainized by faceless people demanding that he finish Season 2 or give up the games industry forever. His former love and success manifested into a monster from his past that prevented his pursuit of a future in the industry. I draw a parallel with the scene where JJ lurches through the hallway as faceless ghosts mock her and throw things at her. Could this be a representation of how Swery felt at the time of his retirement? Thinking about that time, it captures a different kind of alienation and isolation, one that extends beyond sexuality. You see, Swery is the kind of developer that doesn't fit into any one particular mold. Many people don't know how to read him, and a lot of them just know Swery as that zany game creator that made Deadly Premonition, presuming that he's only capable of creating campy so bad they're good games and nothing else. And perhaps for a moment, he believed this notion about himself and began to doubt his ability to create something new. One thing I know for sure is that he truly loves making games, and he's one hell of a people pleaser. The moment JJ utters the line,
"My mind is so clear as a crisp spring morning,"
it felt like Swery was not only shouting out all the people that believed in him, but he was also embracing this odd aspect of himself, holding on to the lessons of his past work, but also ascending beyond them into alien territory that was unknown to him. The missing is evidence of this evolution, as it's unlike anything he's ever made before. It feels as if he's drawn a clear line between his past self and his present self. Some of his audience will embrace the change and support his new direction, whilst others, still holding on to the past, will lash out at the changes. But hey, he's always had a knack for polarization. I wouldn't have it any other way. Sadly, the only thing that's missing from the missing was the marketing. For one, The Missing was released on the same day as Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Who the fuck made that call? Not to mention, the North American PlayStation 4 version and European Switch version were missing in action on launch day. I had to go out of my comfort zone and resort to buying a Steam copy, which really isn't all that big of a deal, but Swery's games have built up a prominent console audience. So you're doing yourself no favors when you're cutting out a big portion of them straight out of the gate. First impressions count. Hey everyone, I find this just now. Nobody told me this fact. Why, I am feeling so suck. Hashtag Darkside Swery. Hashtag Dream King. Hashtag The Missing 2 Game of the Year 2018. Hashtag I am so sorry for hearing. Hashtag The Bad Life. Hashtag I can only drink. Hashtag thanks Obama. Hashtag thanks Arc System Works. To make matters worse, once again, there's no physical release of The Missing, so there goes your chance for having shelf exposure and therefore organic discovery. There wasn't even a Steam store page or option to pre-order the game beforehand. The game just launched suddenly, silently, with barely any time to generate buzz. Look, I'm not the kind of guy to judge a game by its price point, but releasing a 5-hour game at a $30 price point is a slap in the face, considering Deadly Premonition launched in the West at $20 and had loads more content. Don't get me wrong, I love the game and it's totally worth playing, but White Owls is relying solely on the goodwill and pocket depth from die-hard fans to carry them to success, which is not likely to happen in this scenario. Not to mention that Arc System Works just don't seem to know how to market this game. This is the crack team you have in charge of getting exposure?
Swery is known for these kind of mysterious, strange, bizarre games that he brands as Swearism, which is, he was talking about that in the video. So I know, Pity, you mentioned you had played some of his previous games, right?
I think it was PS2, was it Deadly Premonition? I just remember you play this guy and you're trying to figure out like where you are and if you're alive or dead, because you wake up.
Oh.
Yeah, you wake up and you wake up from a car crash, I think. It's been a while, but
okay.
But it's like a survival horror type of surreal game. You go through different dimensions, you fight like weird creatures. So I don't know if I'm making this up, but I'm trying to remember
like a dream of yours.
That's what his games apparently, I guess, do, right?
I'm trying to remember.
So you don't know if you're dead or alive when you wake up?
Yeah.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
That's pretty dope, actually, because you're just, let me see if I'm dead, and you just jump off the window and.
But that's what I remember. I never finished it.
Yeah, when did that game come out again?
2010, I think.
I vaguely remember it.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember it.
I think it was a PS2 or PS. I think
it's been a long time.
I want to say PS2.
Yeah.
Swery, this is why your games are niche, and that's not a good thing for a first game. I am saying this out of tough love. You've made a fantastic game, but you've cast away many potential avenues for people to discover its existence. I don't want to watch a game company with great potential die in real time. Please, do not let this happen when the time comes to release The Good Life. Promote that shit. Hire real marketers. Thank you. Now everyone go out and buy The Missing. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.